Hey, how's it going? In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can forecast next month's results so you know exactly how much you have to spend on ads to generate X amount of revenue or X amount of contribution margin. And I'm going to share with you a tool you can use to do this. All right, so let's go ahead and hop right in. Now, this is called the linear efficiency forecast, and it's very, very simple. What it ultimately does is it takes a historical month's data from the previous year and use that to forecast for this year's monthly data. So for September, as an example, we know that this year, based off previous year's data, if we spend $3,400 a day, we can expect to generate $558 in monthly revenue at $337 in variable costs, meaning that in contribution margin or net profit before fixed costs, we'll be making around $221,000 at a 2x contribution margin ROAS. And we'll be adding around 5,000 new customers over the course of that month. And if we count our 90-day lifetime value, right, because our customers often don't just buy once, if we look at a 90-day span from when they're acquired to when their next purchase is, we look at that value, we'll find we actually have a 7x return here. And our 90-day monthly value, this is obviously a very high LTV brand, is actually 726,000, right? So our contribution margin with the 90 days is a little bit higher here, all right? So that's what this model ultimately does. Now, if we look at a different month, for example, November, you'll see that it shifts and the spend changes to what will get us to our profitability goals here. So really the way you can use this is to identify a few different things. Number one is to figure out how much ad spend you should start off the month with, or what you should expect to spend on a given month based off the historical data from the previous year. The other thing it can do is say, hey, depending on your business objective, if you're trying to maximize revenue, you could pick a different spend goal, right? So this would be maximizing revenue here, or at this point, you'd be maximizing revenue. So if we look at the revenue curve here, we can see at this point is when you would maximize it. I'm at this spend around 606,000 here, right? So that's really what it can do, but it can also tell you if you want to maximize how much you actually take home or your contribution margin, your net profit before fixed costs. You can also figure out at what spend you need to do or what spend you need to spend in order to obtain that maximum contribution margin. Another way you can look at this is say, hey, we don't care about how much we take home. We're just trying to figure out at what point we're losing money. We're like a VC-backed brand and we're just trying to gain equity. Then you can look at, hey, how much you should spend to break even on contribution margin. So basically how much you should spend to break even on all your variable costs. You'll lose on the fixed cost, but if you're a high growth brand that has money to spend, that's what you can do with this chart, right? And then in addition, instead of just relying off the starting daily spend increment, right, or the daily spend increment here, you can just go ahead and do a what if and put in your numbers and say, hey, at what daily spend would I be generating X return with, right? So this takes into account all this data here. It really tells you what you'd be getting a return on if you don't want to use this chart, right? Now we also, of course, have the opportunity to add an efficiency loss or gain, which you'd pretty much be using if, for example, Google raises their CPMs by 5% to hit shareholder goals. In that case, you could do a 5%, a negative 5% efficiency loss, or if you had a 5% efficiency gain for some reason, maybe you have a higher conversion rate across the board, you got a new website that wasn't accounted for in last year's data for this given month, you can add an efficiency gain here, okay? Then of course we can look at our blended variable costs, which we'll get to how this data is calculated here in a second, along with our break-even variable costs here. All right, and in this case, MER and ROAS are kind of the same thing because in this example, this is our only marketing channel, right? Now, one thing to note, we can also look at the maximum revenue, maximum contribution margin, the ROAS at max, and again, what those break-even points really look like as well, okay? So that's how this works. Now, let's talk about how the math works behind this as well, all right? So this is a linear forecast model, meaning you have to make an assumption with any model, and the assumption we're making here is that for every dollar you spend, you're going to see a linear relationship to a decrease in efficiency or a decrease in ROAS. So we're assuming that for any data set that's uploaded to this model, that we're going to see a negative linear relationship with efficiency. So for every dollar you spend, we expect that the efficiency goes down with the continuous dollars you spend. So if your data does not show that, most data does in advertising, this kind of thing, most data for every dollar you spend, you do get less efficiency. That's typically how it is. But if you're uploading data with view-through attribution, or for whatever reason you got a very low spend level, and again with spend level, if it is very low, sometimes you will see more of a wave where you have very low efficiency, and then at a certain point it gets high, and then it gets low, and then you spend even more, and you get a high level of efficiency again. That would obviously not be a linear relationship, and that would be like a polynomial or logarithmic relationship. In this case, we're assuming a linear relationship, which is typically what it looks like at any level of scale, where for every dollar we spend, we see a decrease in return or ROAS at a certain rate, and that rate is determined by the previous data. So that's the assumption we're making here, is that your ROAS, or MER in this case, because they're technically the same thing as far as this function goes, is going to decrease linearly given the data set. But again, for example, in this data set, we have January, which is not as linear. You can see it's a little bit different here. That can obviously make things a little bit janky, right? So we'll identify how you can pick those out here in a second as well. Okay, so that's how you can use this tool to kind of figure out how much you should spend and what your efficiency should look like. Now, if you're curious to learn a little bit more about this, how this works, we have 3 channels here, basically a blended channel. Then we have our channel 2, which can be whatever channel you upload for. In this case, it's Google Ads, and this will auto-populate with whatever channel you uploaded for, whatever month you have in here. And then of course we have channel 1, which in this case is Facebook, but again, it could be any ad channel that you want to use. So really all it is we take the date, the source, the ad spend, and the revenue on a last click basis from Triple Whale from the previous year, or for any month that you want to project for this year. We go ahead and we just copy and paste that into these rows here. Same thing with Google. That's all we have to do. It'll calculate our ROAS or MER. Again, in this case, MER and ROAS is going to be the same number. And then what it will also do is it will highlight months that are outliers. So these are months that might be far off from your different months' performance, either in spend or in revenue or in efficiency. So it will look for any of those 3 and mark them with just telling you which months are likely outliers, and it will highlight them in red as well. So you can see as we get lower, obviously November is pretty much always an outlier, just so you can be aware when you're looking at the charts why things might look a little weird, right? Because again, we're taking all of the month's data to output that new linear forecast for this year's month's data relative to last year's, right? Now, what you can also do here is adjust the sensitivity. So if you, for whatever reason, did not believe you really had much of an outlier, and I'll actually make this just very low. You can see the lower the sensitivity goes, so the lower the percent, the more sensitive it is to outliers. Now, this other month was identified as an outlier, but if we increase the sensitivity, now it actually takes away an outlier, right? So that is how that works. You can adjust the sensitivity of the outlier detection using the IQR method just by lowering or increasing the percent, okay? Then the last one here, of course, is just a blend of both our channels to see an overall marketing effect. In the future, we're going to add a feature for more channels. We're also going to be adding in a more precise new and old customer section. So you have to upload your new and old customer daily data for spend and revenue, and so we can actually split the forecast up into new customer and returning customer. As of now, you would just have to manually upload either your blended customers or manually upload only your new or old customers to forecast for only your new or old customers, okay? Now, getting into these metrics here, we ask a few questions around average order value, cost of goods, average lifetime value, these kinds of things, and these all go into our cost calculator here. And really the goal of the cost calculator is 2 things. Number 1, to calculate your variable cost or your blended contribution margin. So really how much you're making before fixed costs in net profit. And then we also have a function here for putting in a hypothetical margin. So saying, what if I wanted to make 15% after covering my variable costs? What would we be able to afford in terms of a CPA? And then that goes into this chart here, given different spend levels, how much are you generating in revenue, profit, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, we also account for that 90-day CPA. So again, we look at, hey, what's our customer value within 90 days? That's usually a standard. You could do 60 days, you could do 120 days, whatever your sales cycle kind of value length looks like. But in this case, we can see that, hey, our normal first order AOV is about 69. Our 90-day average order value or 90-day lifetime value is around 90. And so we can look at if we acquire someone, for example, at our first order ROAS. So if we acquire someone for our 90-day CPA target, which is 38, on that first order, we're only going to be at a 1.77 return because they only ordered $70 of product. But as they go through the 90 days and they come back to buy, then we're going to kind of revert back to that 2.33 goal ROAS we set via the 15% target margin. Or if we just want to say, hey, what if we acquired, ultimately, if we're looking at our 90-day value and we acquire someone for our $70 AOV or a $69 AOV at $29.55, what would that 90-day value ROAS look like if they ultimately purchase the $90 worth of product with our $29.55 CPA? So that's all this is looking at, hey, at what spend level are we generating what return based on either a first order ROAS or based off a 90-day ROAS, just based off your hypothetical margin, which again is controlled based on the numbers that you put in this list here, okay? So that's really all this is. It's very, very, very simple, all right? Now, one last thing here is with linear forecast models, when you're looking at these, it's really important to understand that the data is going to be most accurate when you're using numbers that are within your historical range. So this tells you, hey, the highest daily spend accuracy is between 1324 and 3729. So this really tells you, hey, you know, at what spend accuracy are we going to be the most accurate here for the month of November? So you just want to make sure for the most accurate results to be looking at a time frame or really a range here between the 1324 and 3729. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions on this, let me know. Now, we haven't released this tool publicly yet. It will be public very, very soon. If you want early access, feel free to leave a comment or send me a message and we'll get you linked up. But like I said, we're adding some more features here. We're going to also be adding and making the linear forecast a little bit more complicated and no longer linear by adding in a recency bias, where you also have to upload a recent months of data, a recent previous month of data to account for that kind of recency bias, in addition to some more macroeconomic factors we're going to be using to calculate an efficiency level, okay? But for now, this is very, very usable for most brands, spending anything between a couple thousand a month to high six figures to seven figures a month in ad spend, all right? So again, let me know if you want access to this. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon. All right, bye-bye.